So, I want to talk about Demon Slayer, and I'm using the fact that Demon Slayer video games exist as an excuse to do it. I figured I'd play around in Hinokami Chronicles 2 while I attempt to give some form to all the thoughts and feelings swirling around my head about this series. And before we begin, I just want to give a heads up that yeah, heavy on the spoilers, because I just can't do justice to everything I want to touch on without fully going there. So, you've been warned and all that. I've seen some takes that claim that Demon Slayer is overhyped, or spectacle over substance. But I would argue that the spectacle of the show and its gorgeous use of colors and animation is the perfect delivery system for what I find to be the core theme of Demon Slayer: empathy. I sat down to write a script for this video multiple times, but each time everything would quickly spiral out of control and become too large in scope and too unwieldy. So I think, at least for now, I'm going to stick to the Hashira, the Kamado siblings, and Lady Tamayo. Sound good? Let's start with Mitsuri Kanroji. I've seen some people be a little dismissive of Mitsuri, or claim that she doesn't do much in the narrative, or is even failed by it. I don't find this to be true. Mitsuri is a character defined by her relationships to others. This is reflected even in what she wears. Over her uniform, she wears a plain white haori, gifted to her by Kyojiro Rengoku, her former mentor. On her legs, she wears a pair of bright green, vertical striped stockings, a gift from Obanai Iguro, the serpent Hashira. Someone shown to be very closed off to others, particularly women due to his past trauma, but open and affectionate towards Mitsuri. Even Mitsuri's motives for joining the Demon Slayer Corps were relational in nature. She joined in the hopes of meeting someone to marry who would not be intimidated or off-put by her immense physical strength, due to her body's unique composition and traits deemed by many as unsuitable, such as her voracious appetite and multicolored hair. After an initial failed marriage proposal, she had taken measures to hide her unusual hair color and suppress her appetite and shown strength, and nearly succeeded in an arrangement with a civilian man before the events of the show. However, she was unable to go through with it, and decided to present herself authentically to others by joining the Corps, though she still felt lingering insecurities and doubts about it. Yet she took that leap in an earnest desire to find community where she could be accepted and even loved as herself. This love that she desired but also shared freely with others manifested in her creation of a new breathing style: love breathing. Love breathing incorporates elements of Mitsuri's superhuman flexibility and her unique whip or ribbon-like Nichiren sword. Using this breathing style, she can unleash attacks that cover a wide range of motion, as well as long ranges that a normal katana would be unable to accomplish. You can track Mitsuri's arc in the show through where and how she shows up. At the initial Hashira meeting about the fate of the Kamado siblings, she's introduced as disarmingly warm. She's one of the few not outright ready to attack them on the spot. She reads a bit like comic relief at first, but her softness isn't a bit, it's a worldview. Her first true showcase happens during the Swordsmith Village arc. When Hantengu's form splits and the battle sprawls, Mitsuri becomes the sole hope that keeps everyone alive long enough for breakthroughs to happen. Her love breathing lets her defend vast angles and protect everyone involved. She's literally covering for and supporting others while they take the risks that they're best at. It's no coincidence that her Slayer mark manifests for the first time in the heat of this defense, not as a solo moment of glory, but as an expansion of her capacity to work in relationship to others, to shield and support. Later in the final battle against Muzan, she does the same thing at an even higher cost, drawing his aggression, disrupting his rhythm, and buying precious seconds when absolutely every moment counts. This thread runs straight through her bond with Obanai Iguro. Obanai is an incredibly guarded and prickly man, battling his own deeply rooted insecurities and shame. In Mitsuri, he finds a kind of oxygen he didn't know he needed. The gifts we see, his green striped stockings, Rengoku's white haori, aren't just cute details. They're proof that she lives inside a community of care, and that others choose to adorn her as she has adorned them with her attention, compassion, and love. Obanai's tenderness and protectiveness towards her is one of the series' most beautiful developments. The serpent Hashira, whose safety has always been in rules and distance, learns that safety can also be in the form of a person. When they're side by side, you feel how her openness unties his knots, and how his steadiness grounds her. Their late confession, simple, domestic in its imagined future, lands because the show has been preparing us to see love and relationships with others not as a distraction from duty, but the whole point of it. So coming back to this idea of the narrative failing Mitsuri, do I wish that Mitsuri survived the final encounter and lived a happily retired life with Obanai and the others? Of course I do. But I wish that for all the Hashira. Unfortunately, things don't always work out. the way that we wish they would. I think that Mitsuri's narrative job is to act as the counter-argument to cynicism within the core. And in my personal philosophy, I'll always cheer for that. Where other Hashira take and metabolize pain into rigidity or ferocity, Mitsuri metabolizes it into more availability. Her very excess of being too strong, too hungry, too colorful becomes her thesis. There is no such thing as too much when you're built to share, when you're built to love. She models a different form of heroics. She notices, she includes, she invites, she loves, and people fight harder near her, survive longer behind her, and imagine gentler futures because of her. So, since we opened that can of snakes, let's talk about Obanai Iguro, the serpent Hashira. Obanai gets a lot of love around the internet, and I say rightly so. From his striking visual appearance to his sweet relationship with Mitsuri to his often comedic jealous interactions with Tanjiro, he definitely leaves an impression every time he appears. What I find fascinating about Obanai is that even though his childhood trauma centers around a snake demon and his familial cult that worshipped her, he didn't let this color his perception of all snakes. In fact, he's always seen with his little white snake, Kaburamaru, wrapped around his shoulders. And he is in fact the serpent Hashira. As the first male child born in generations, he's treated like an offering in waiting, isolated and caged. His own relatives slash his mouth open in a grotesque effort to mimic the snaky mouth of the demon they sacrificed to. When he finally manages to escape, the cost ripples outward. The demon slaughters the rest of his family except one cousin, who angrily berates him and blames him fully for the event. And it's here as a young boy that Obanai internalizes a tragic message. My existence causes harm. From this jumping off place, rigidity and strict rule following becomes a life raft. If he can control every variable, obey every rule, punish every slip, maybe he won't let down anyone again. Maybe he can atone for and receive forgiveness for even being alive. His exacting standards and ferocious suspicion is mirrored in his unique breathing style, serpent breathing. It's all angles, feints, and tight control. He's a master swordsman, and he can also work perfectly in sync with Kaburamaru, something that becomes vital in the final battle when he is blinded. Kaburamaru becomes his eyes, and he relaxes his grip on ultimate control so much that he places his very life in the, well, not hands, but you know what I mean, of another. It's tragic that we never get to see the relationship between Obanai and Mitsuri bloom beyond the walls of the Infinity Castle. With Mitsuri, Obanai tests a radical idea. What if atonement doesn't have to be endless self-punishment, but devotion to another? The stockings that he gives her, in a practical sense, are something to warm her, to protect her, even if not by much. It's a gift given in warmth, very different from his cold, warden of rules, usual demeanor, and he vows to replace the stockings if ever they get damaged. He pledges this continuous care. As Mitsuri is dying from her wounds, he scoops her up on the brink of death himself. She can no longer hold him, so he holds her. And now, fully blind, he can no longer see her, but she sees him clearly until the end. They perish like this, him shielding her as his world goes dark. The boy who believed he could only bring ruin, discovering that he can also be a home. Obanai embodies the core's dangerous temptation to confuse discipline with moral worth, but then he disproves it. He starts off as a man keeping himself small and separate to atone for a past he didn't choose, but ends as someone who lets love expand him, even if only long enough for a confession and a promise to meet again. Now, I'm sure some of you will immediately balk at the idea of Gyu swimming in emotions, but honestly, I find him and his fellow water-breathing users to be the emotional core of the story. If it had been any other Hashira that encountered Tanjiro and Nezuko on that fateful day after she was turned into a demon, I believe there'd be no story. Nezuko would most likely have been killed, and Tanjiro would be a traumatized shell, robbed of all that remained of his beloved family. But we got this story. Gyu showed up. Beneath his stoic demeanor and his own deep grief, he was able to see a glimmer of hope in the Kamado siblings. He believed that just maybe they could be different, and against all his training and personal experience and duties, he took a chance on them. He allowed Nezuko to live and delivered them to his own beloved mentor, Urokudaki. He would later put his very life on the line, pledging to commit seppuku along with Urokudaki if Nezuko ever harmed a human. He saved them, he guided them, and he vouched for them. He also restrained Shinobu from getting to the scene and absolutely murdering Nezuko in the forest. He went against his own comrades to follow what his heart felt was right. Gyu wears a very distinctive haori that is split down the middle into two contrasting halves. The right half is a dark red color, while the left is decorated in green, orange, and yellow geometrical patterns. These Haori hafts are sentimental mementos, with the red side formerly belonging to his late older sister, and the pattern side his deceased friend and fellow student of Urokodaki's, Sabito. He is the only character literally wearing his emotions on his sleeves. Ever since final selection, where Sabito died yet Giyu survived, he's believed he's living on borrowed time and worth. Water breathing suits him elementally because it accepts and yields. It can flow around a heavy rock of trauma without pretending that it doesn't exist. But the same temperament that makes him such a graceful swordsman, able to compartmentalize and rise to the occasion during battle, also erodes his self-worth. He doesn't think he rightfully earned the title of the Water Hashira. He thinks he's merely temporarily holding a place that rightfully belongs to the dead, or another yet to come. That's why he's so angry when it becomes obvious that Tanjiro isn't walking the path to become the next Water Hashira, as he had hoped to pass the title along to him. This is also why he turns down participating in the Hashira training at first. He says he's not like the others, which of course doesn't come off well, but what he means is, I don't deserve to stand with them. People clock him as aloof or stuck up, but really it's not arrogance, but a man refusing to take up space he thinks should belong to someone else. The contempt of others like Sanemi and Obanai lands because it confirms Giyu's worst fears about himself, fears that he is all too ready to believe. He shouldn't be there, he doesn't deserve to be there, and ultimately he doesn't deserve to be alive. What right does he have to survive when others he viewed as far more talented or deserving didn't? Tanjiro is the one who steps in to interrupt this spiral. He refuses to give up on Giyu and let him stew in his own solitude. He is doggedly persistent in pulling Giyu back out into the world. He repeatedly names Giyu's goodness out loud and reframes survival as an obligation to the fallen, not an insult to them. Even then, survivor's guilt still nips at him. When he believes that Tanjiro died after the final fight with Muzan, the dam breaks. Tears flood, and he laments that he is always the one who is saved. It's such a pained and raw sentence. Like his water-breathing form dead calm, on the surface Giyu might appear cold and reserved, but beneath the surface he is an absolute whirlpool of feelings. He's just discerning about where he pours them into. He loses his composure when Akaza goes for Tanjiro, and the world around him slows when Shinobu's death is announced. Those are not the reactions of an empty man. They're the reactions of someone who's built up a dam to keep from drowning in pain, and only opens the floodgates when it matters the most. The series begins in his hands because it trusts him to make the first merciful decision, and it keeps coming back to him whenever it wants to show that restraint can be as heroic as aggression. So, I have to confess, while I love the whole cast of Demon Slayer, I have a particular soft spot for Shinobu and Lady Tamayo, who we'll get to later. A couple of years ago, I attended a yoga instructor intensive training through Native Strength Revolution in the mountains of West Virginia. I was excited to be there, but definitely felt a little bit like an imposter. I wasn't the strongest, I didn't have a lot of stamina, and I never viewed myself as able to have any kind of authority, like a teacher or anything. So, I was nervous but determined to hang in there and try. On just day 2 of the training, another girl brought out envelopes of the most beautiful beaded earrings that she had made for all of the participants. When she got to me, she asked if I was familiar with the anime Demon Slayer. I said I was vaguely aware of it, but hadn't had a chance to check it out yet. She briefly told me about a certain character in it, known as the Insect Hashira, who had a butterfly aesthetic and possessed a sort of gentle strength that was different than the others, but inspirational in its own way. She said that she had made this particular pair of earrings in her color scheme, and wanted me to have them because I reminded her of the character. I nodded along and tried to take from that what I could. I'd only known her for 2 days, but I was flattered that she had formed any kind of opinion on me at all. Now, having watched the show, and it quickly becoming one of my all-time favorites, this incredible gesture and her words mean so much more to me now. So, anyways, Shinobu Kocho, aka the Insect Hashira. Shinobu is an interesting case because I feel like a lot of nuance often gets swept away when people are discussing her. I think it's very reductive to say, oh yeah, her entire personality is a complete facade, and underneath she's really just angry and vengeful. But it's not black and white like that. She is shown to genuinely care for and nurture Kanao and the girls of the Butterfly Mansion after the death of her beloved sister. She is one of the first to come to accept Tanjiro and Nezuko despite the deep hatred she feels towards demons for all they have taken from her in her life. She offers them a place in her home. She runs rehabilitation training for recovering Corps members, and her extensive medical knowledge is invaluable in saving countless lives and even in stopping Zenitsu from transforming into a spider. Yet she does harbor a lot of rage. To me, it is very reminiscent of Bruce Banner talking about his secret to controlling his transformation into the Hulk. The secret being, he is always angry. And of course, Tanjiro sniffs this right out. And it is then that she opens up to him and entrusts him with the precious dream of first her sister and then herself. Shinobu carries two candles at once: her sister Kane's dream of coexistence with demons, and her own fiery rage. People often call her smile a mask, but I think it's more like a vow. She chooses gentleness first. Her smile isn't empty, it's disciplined. And because she actively keeps choosing it, her anger doesn't leak out sideways and harm others. It is refined into a singular purpose. She's physically small, and she knows that. She just doesn't possess the raw strength to cut through a demon's neck. But rather than letting that defeat her, she alchemizes her weakness into a strength. She develops superior speed and a system of using a rapier-thin blade to deliver various poisons she concocts herself with surgical accuracy. The resulting insect style looks graceful, but has deadly results. Every limitation she has becomes innovation, and she employs her highly effective techniques to become a paradox of sorts. She holds the door open to coexistence through her hope, but she also stands there, fully armed, at the entrance. Which unfortunately brings us to Doma, and I will not mask my distaste, as he is my least favorite character in all of Demon Slayer. He absolutely repulses me. But my vendetta about him aside, let's discuss hers. Taking every variable into account, Shinobu knows that physically she will not be a match for this demon. So with deliberate calculation, she turns her own body into a final sacrificial dose of poison. When Doma devours her, he thinks he's won, but in reality he swallowed her plan. The poison ravages him from the inside, and the opening allows Kanao and Inosuke to finish what Shinobu started. It is a victory that is achieved through trust, mentorship, and selflessness. Narratively, Shinobu is the hinge between compassion and retribution. She keeps the story honest about what coexistence would actually cost, and she also shows how strength is not one size fits all. Rengoku burns, Gyomei endures, Shinobu heals, calculates, and when necessary, she stings. So, speaking of Rengoku, for me, and I'm sure countless others, the story really kicked off and things got really real really fast with the death of Kyojuro Rengoku. It was like, oh, even a Hashira can die in this world. Suddenly there were stakes. And of course, it had to be that punch to the gut of it being the literal ray of sunshine, cheerful and enthusiastic Captain America of the group. Rengoku is the kind of hero who doesn't need a fancy speech to tell you who he is. His code speaks for itself. As a child, his mother planted a simple conviction in his heart. If you were born strong, your strength belongs to the weak. Not to glory, but to service. You protect others. This ethos explains everything about him. His booming encouragement, relentless training, and the way he treats his comrades. He loved his family deeply, which complicated things for him. He had a particularly tumultuous relationship with his father, who was once a formidable flame Hashira himself, but collapsed into grief and bitterness after his wife's death and disillusionment with the Corps. He initially trained Rengoku, but left him on his own and self-taught eventually. He had to cobble together mastery over flame breathing from manuals, observation, and stubborn persistence. Rather than letting this harden him, he instead became the kind of mentor he didn't have. He has all these catchphrase-like affirmations and can spot potential that others miss. He recognizes Tanjiro's moral center immediately, and even extends his approval and praise to Nezuko, not allowing his bias against demons to cloud his judgment when she has proven herself so admirably. On the Mugen train, Rengoku ensures the survival of all the trapped passengers as well as the Tanjiro squad. Hooray, goodness and strength of heart saves the day. But then, of course, in comes Akaza. And as Rengoku goes toe-to-toe with the Upper Moon, the first we have encountered up until this point, all of his teachings and beliefs come to the front. He fights not for the prestige or even to win, really, but to hold the line long enough for everyone behind him to live. He uses all of his strength to protect those weaker than him. And of course, Akaza can't stand this and rails against what he sees as a wasting of strength and potential, begging Rengoku to just give in and become a demon. This, of course, is something Rengoku could never do. He succeeds in drawing the demon out long enough for it to nearly be sunrise, sending Akaza running off. Mortally wounded, in his last moments, he maintains a calm presence for the others. His last act is still an act of service. Rengoku's death dramatically impacts the rest of the characters and leaves a permanent mark on the narrative. His absence lingers and his memory keeps appearing throughout the rest of the series. Characters measure themselves against it, carry it forward, and fight to honor and avenge it. I think if there's a main lesson he teaches, it's this. Strength is not a right you claim, it's a promise you keep. The flame in his title isn't fury or ferocity, it's warmth. Kyojiro Rengoku was such an incredibly warm and entirely earnest person, and that's why his loss is felt so heavily. This brings us to the one, the only, god of festivals and flashiness, Tengen Usui. And oh, Tengen. Much could be said. Side note, I saw one of those, this Demon Slayer character equals your zodiac sign, and gotta say, I was less than thrilled with Tengen being assigned for Sagittarius. But oh well. Tengen is an interesting character with a lot of admirable qualities, although you might not notice them initially and be blinded by his flashy outward demeanor. Although, I would say that's the point. Tengen accessorizes flamboyantly, wearing two thick gold rings around his upper arms, some snazzy fingerless blue gloves, and of course, adorning his forehead, he wears a headband embellished with 6 large gemstones. Chains of gems also hang off of said headband, framing his face like earrings or tassels. He also wears distinctive red makeup around his left eye and golden earrings. All of this seems like a bit of an odd choice for a former shinobi at first glance. When we first meet him, all that glitter can easily read as vanity, but in context, it's actually reclamation. Tengen grew up under a father who believed people are tools, useful only until they fail or break, and raised his children accordingly. Their shinobi training was brutal. Most of Tengen's siblings died before they were even old enough to choose the life being forced on them. His brother survives by amputating his feelings and stepping into the mold of their father. Tengen is forged in that crucible of guilt and grief. He carries all those losses with him like a ledger. He breaks with that cruel utilitarian world in stages. First, he rejects his father's creed and the brother who inherited it. Then he rejects invisibility itself. Shinobi are meant to vanish, to slip into and amongst the shadows, but Tengen insists on being seen. Flashiness becomes a philosophy for him. If life can be stolen in the shadows so easily, then he needs to loudly proclaim life, joy, and ultimately love. It isn't shallow, it's an act of defiance he chooses every day. That defiance evolves into responsibility when it comes to his wives Makio, Suma, and Hinatsuru. Contrary to the rest of the culture they were raised in, he doesn't treat them as assets or tools for a mission. He treats them as valued people whose lives matter more than the success of any mission. In the entertainment district, he orders a retreat the second their safety is in danger, and every call he makes places their survival first. Later, when fighting leaves him down an eye and missing an arm, he actually retires, placing the wholeness and happiness of his family above the fight-to-the-death martyrdom he was raised on. By being able to shake off the destructive beliefs he came from, Tengen is able to really step up and be the man and leader both his father and brother could never hope to be. His capacity to feel deep grief and guilt for those lives he believes he failed to save allows him to be an incredibly humane leader. He generously praises, delegates, and takes the most danger upon himself, always. In conversation with Gyutaro, he reveals that he doesn't see himself as anything special and actually finds the idea dryly laughable. Any outward perception of narcissism really is just a facade. I really like that Tengen is a counterpoint to the core's tendency toward grim heroism and ultimate self-sacrifice. Not that those things can't be admirable, but it's so refreshing to see Tengen choose life, and choose it loudly. For him, victory was the ability to walk home with the people he loves, and that's honestly beautiful. Getting to know Muichiro Tokito is a challenge because when we first meet him in the series, even he doesn't know who he is. The title of the Mist Hashira is so fitting for him because he's lost in this misty fog of trauma and amnesia to some degree. A child prodigy and the youngest Hashira, Muichiro already stands apart from the others. His personality initially seems cold, removed, lacking in any ability to connect to others. But Tanjiro keeps pushing back on this, not letting his dismissive and rude, intentionally or not, demeanor slide, no matter how special he thinks he is. And eventually, Tanjiro's light is able to guide him through. What Muichiro had forgotten wasn't just events, but his own core self. His childhood was devastating. His mother fell ill, eventually succumbing, and his father died trying desperately to fetch medicine for her. Then a demon shows up and his brother dies trying to protect him. A death that is particularly devastating because he was all Muichiro had left in the world, and had gone cold and callous after the death of their parents, chastising him for his bleeding heart. And yet he too, in the end, still died trying to save another out of love. Of course, all this is enough to send any system into shock and repression. We see him thaw throughout his appearances. At the Hashira meeting, he's distant to the point of rudeness. In the Swordsmith village, that distance becomes a narrative device the series can argue against. When Gyoko strikes, Muichiro can't get Tanjiro's words out of his head and goes off script, so to speak. He saves Kotetsu, someone he just considered a lowly child before. He chooses caring for others over strictly following the mission. And in turn, he is later saved by that same child. He starts to reawaken his true nature and why he fights. Tanjiro refused to accept that brilliance requires isolation. Muichiro's main job in the narrative was to show dissociation and isolation not as surface-level jerk behavior, but as a real wound. The forgetting may have allowed Muichiro to survive a whole lot of pain for a while, but it's not sustainable and it's not a way to live. Gyome Himejima looms larger than life among the demon slayers. He literally towers over them. He is an extremely muscular man, his white eyes with no visible pupils or irises, and the overall appearance of a monk. He is also frequently seen crying. At first, I wasn't really sure what to make of him, but then, like sedimentary rock, his layers began to reveal themselves. Before he was the stone Hashira, Gyome was in fact a blind monk, raising a handful of orphans in a rundown temple. He would often suffer and go without to keep them fed, and made sure to burn wisteria incense every night to ward off demons and keep them safe. Then, when tragically and preventively, a demon was able to enter the temple through the cowardly betrayal of one of the orphans, he did the most simple, human thing he could do. He told the children to stay behind him and put their faith in him. Only one child did. The other terrified children ran and were slaughtered. Gyome was able to draw upon an inner strength he never knew he possessed and basically punched the demon throughout the entire night, making it to dawn, saving both himself and the child. Again, tragically, this little girl, who he gave everything to protect, to keep alive through brutal hand-to-hand fighting and sheer force of will, ultimately betrayed him. She was traumatized and confused and unable to process what had happened, so she turned on Gyome, accusing him of being the one that slaughtered the other children. Thankfully, he was saved from execution by Kaguya Ubuyashiki, someone who knew the truth and believed in him, and he quickly pledged his loyalty to his savior and his cause. After that event, skepticism became a reflex for Gyome. He still protected the young and the innocent, he just stopped assuming that he could trust them. How sad. However, in Tanjiro, he sees something to truly believe in. After Tanjiro completes his particular Hashira training, he questions him. He comes to the conclusion that Tanjiro's humility is genuine, not performative. He has a sense of maturity beyond his years and a sense of purity without being naive that earns Gyome's respect. If there is one child that can be trusted to stand behind the shield, so to speak, and even pick it up to protect others when needed, not give in to their own selfish fear, then perhaps there can be others. Gyome's faith in others might have been badly bruised, but it can keep going. Oh, Sanemi, a blustery, blustery boy. According to his wiki page, Sanemi is abrasive, hot-blooded, rash, and stubborn, oftentimes impulsive and quick to lash out. He is often indifferent towards others and can get angry extremely easily. The only person Sanemi displayed reverence towards was Kaguya Ubuyashiki, and this was only after realizing the man was much more than his outward appearance suggested. But why? Why is he so angry and abrasive all of the time? What happened to him? Sanemi's rage didn't arrive out of nowhere. It's a deep, deep scar. He comes from an abusive household where his father absolutely tormented the family. His mother would do all she could to protect her 7 children, but one day is tragically turned into a demon herself, slaughtering 5 of those children with her own hands. Sanemi is still a child himself, and is forced to fight and kill his own beloved mother to save his one remaining sibling, Genya. And after all of this, his own brother has a knee-jerk reaction in the heat of the moment and declares him a monster. That's a lot. To add further pain, it is strongly alluded to that Sanemi had feelings for Kane, Shinobu's elder sister and fellow Hashira, before she too was killed by a demon. This guy can truly not catch a break. Then, his brother Genya goes and starts consuming demon flesh to gain temporary power and abilities during fights, something that utterly repulses him and further strains their relationship. So Sanemi lashes out at the world like a swirling tornado, hence Wind Hashira. He keeps pushing Genya away until the very end, trying to get him to quit the Corps, thinking that maybe hatred would shield him better than love. Sadly, by the time Sanemi is able to open up and talk to Genya like a brother, it's too late. Genya lays dying after the fight against Kokushibo, one final and terrible loss. Sanemi was never able to rein in his pain and anger when Genya was alive, but after the final battle it is shown that he has become less reactive and more responsive, more mellow. He even apologizes to Nezuko and pats her head. Something unthinkable earlier on in the series when he loudly voiced his hatred and distrust of her, even stabbing her, trying to provoke her into attacking. I'm not really a fan of that saying, hurt people, but it definitely applies here. It was only through the shock and anguish of also losing Genya that he was able to finally crack open and come to terms with his true feelings. Okay, whew. Finally got through all my word vomit about the Hashira. Now, on to the heart and soul of the show, the Kamado siblings. Let's start with Nezuko. I've seen some odd takes out there about Nezuko, and to each their own, but some of them I just don't see. For example, some have claimed that Nezuko is a non-character. No agency, no personality, no real meaning to the story, blah blah blah. On this, I would wholeheartedly disagree. Nezuko is a complete singularity. It is through her miraculous sheer force of will that we even have a story. When she is first turned by Muzan, after the brutal annihilation of the rest of her family, obviously barring Tanjiro, she awakens like any other demon, ravenous. But even pre-muzzle and hypnosis, she somehow manages to hold herself back from devouring Tanjiro, after a bit of a rough start, and even tries to protect him against Gyu. As touched on earlier, this incredible behavior so impresses Gyu and then Urokodaki that they then put their very lives on the line to vouch for her. She is literally starving at all times, yet even when Senemi dangles his particularly tantalizing blood right in her face, she refuses. And yes, she has a brief moment during the events in the entertainment district where she starts to go out of control. But her strength of spirit is still enough to cling to her memories, love for her family, and ultimately humanity, and will herself back down and out of that state, even though she had just been through so much bodily trauma. It was later revealed in a letter by Lady Tamayo that her underdeveloped personality as a demon was due to her not being fully conscious, as she was prioritizing forcefully willing her body to adapt at a startling rate, and even develop resistance to the sun, over regaining her consciousness. Even as a demon, she was still displaying the same selflessness she had in human life. And of course, she becomes the only demon to have ever successfully developed the ability to walk in the sun. Nezuko's arc is agency by choice, or action, not agency by speech. She is literally muzzled, so she can't bite. And I get that that might not feel the most fulfilling for some. To me, though, it's similar to the principle of show, don't tell. Since Nezuko can't talk and explain her thoughts and feelings, every action she takes in the series stands out and speaks volumes. The muzzle of the box, the long restorative sleeps, people could read these as passivity. I read them as constraints, as discipline. These are the boundaries she has to live within if she is to be able to live near humans, and she accepts and works within this. The blood demon art she develops in the heat of battle doesn't just cook demons, it's able to ignite without harming humans, and also synergizes with and helps amplify Tanjiro's techniques. This is a manifestation of her will. When she pulls back in the entertainment district, it's not due to a command or force. She chooses to stand down from feeling the weight of her mother's lullaby, the weight of her family and her humanity, and she sobs. That's agency. Narratively, Nezuko is the ethical keystone. She forces us and the characters of the story to examine whether demonness is a fate or a condition. Is it a death sentence or possibly treatable? She is the catalyst for Gyu's mercy, Urokodaki's wager, and Tamayo's research. She brings together all these different characters around a central care. Nezuko refuses to be what Muzan, her pain, and her very instincts are trying to make her at all times. She chooses who she is and inspires the hope and goodwill of those around her to believe and affirm that identity and fight to see it through. I find Nezuko incredibly inspiring. Okay, the time has come for Tanjiro Kamado. What initially got me interested in this series and what got me to stick around. Tanjiro has a beautiful soul. No, literally, as we see on the Mugen train. On the train, we are shown Tanjiro's soulscape while he's put to sleep. It's not a fortress or a maze. It actually doesn't offer up any defenses whatsoever. It is an endless, calm expanse of blue, open sky and crystal clear water. It's breathtaking. When his would-be assassin slips in to shatter his spiritual core, he is met with gentle, luminous little beings that take his hand and happily lead him right to it, just because he was looking for it. Faced with a soul so open and serene, he just can't do it. He kneels, weeping, and thanks Tanjiro's spirit. This shows us who this young, traumatized boy is at the deepest level. Transparent, welcoming, safe, open, warm. For such a short scene, it left a huge impact on me. Everything about Tanjiro radiates from that core. His love for his family is all-consuming and drives him forward at all times. He carries their wisdom and their warmth with him and always turns to them in dire situations. His vow to save Nezuko is a rehabilitation mission. He fights to restore what remains of his family at all costs. Tanjiro is empathy in motion. With his advanced sense of smell, he can detect anger, fear, grief, and intention in another. After battles, he graciously offers a listening ear to the demons he has slain, and even prays for them, not to excuse or even forgive them, but to bear witness to the human pain that warped them. He guides the dying to remember a time before their monstrosity. And his empathy is contagious. It secures him allies, even Tamayo and Yushiro, who are demons themselves, feel that they can trust him and the purity of his intentions, the fact that he is still able to see demons as people. His mission of joining the Corps and defeating Muzan to save his sister reframes their fight to one of hope and cure. It gives them something beyond just survival and revenge to strive for. The series repeatedly hits him with impossible choices and heartbreaking losses that would turn many others to apathy or even cruelness. But he meets each one head on, sometimes literally, with the same answer: protect life, honor the lost, change the conditions that make monsters. He never gives in to hopelessness or grief, and he never allows the horrors around him to change who he fundamentally is as a person. Tanjiro remains so very gentle and kind, and immensely physically and mentally strong. When I first entered into this show, totally ignorant of its themes and how events would play out, I was so pleasantly surprised and happy to come across a character like Tanjiro, a shonen protagonist no less. It seemed like such a hopeful and exciting step forward to have this worldwide phenomenon be helmed by someone like him. He gives permission for boys, for anyone, to lead with care and gentleness. His empathy saves his sister's life, reshapes his allies, and even breaks through to his enemies, and it really raises the bar for all that anime can be. Thank you, Tanjiro. The final character I want to talk about is Lady Tamayo. Not Zenitsu or Inosuke, and trust me, I have so much to say about them too, and maybe we'll get to that someday. But Tamayo. Other than Shinobu, Tamayo is my favorite character in the series. Her character embodies so much complexity and depth, and I find her incredibly compelling. Without Tamayo, Muzan's defeat and Nezuko's restoration would not have been possible. Point blank. I think she is the unspoken hero in Demon Slayer and MVP of the Infinity Castle arc. Her wiki states, Tamayo is a gentle, wise, and incredibly intelligent individual. Having devoted most of her life to the researching of demons and humans' transformation into one, she was one of the most knowledgeable individuals to be shown. Despite the generally antagonistic and virulent relationship between humanity and demons, she shows a great deal of kindness towards humans. She made it part of her mission to assist injured or sick individuals with her expansive knowledge, Tanjiro Kamado being among them. Tamayo's story begins in ruin. As a human, she was gravely ill, and Muzan exploited her desire to survive and be with her family to convince her to turn. Sadly, the first thing she did with her new ravenous demon hunger was annihilate the very family that she so loved. That's the birth of her hatred. A hatred that would burn and drive her to see to it that someday Muzan Kibutsuji would be no more. Her family would be avenged. Unlike the other demons, she manages to break free of Muzan's leash. Through painstaking self-modification and experimentation, she severs Muzan's curse, enough to even speak his name, and get herself down to being able to function on the smallest amount of human blood possible, always ethically sourced. She is also why Yushiro exists. She turns him with informed consent in the hope of saving his life. Under her tutelage, he can subsist on even less blood than her, and learns to temper his more aggressive tendencies. Where Muzan creates servants, Tamayo created a partner, and he is utterly devoted to her. Tamayo despises being a demon, so when Nezuko looks at her and recognizes her as a human, as family, Tamayo is overcome. It's a really heartfelt and beautiful moment. This recognition of everything she's been fighting for means everything to her. Nezuko's existence and the bond between the Kamado siblings reinvigorates Tamayo's hope, and with their help, in collecting, she is able to analyze a lot of demon blood to ultimately create medicine that will restore Nezuko's humanity and make Muzan killable. Although for him, I suppose it acts more like a poison. She hauls his body towards humanity, accelerating his decay and severely weakening him. And she also physically holds him in place throughout the night of the final fight, anchoring him to the spot and refusing to give in until he can be found and defeated by the Hashira. It is a truly self-sacrificial act, and even in this, she doesn't view herself as cleansed or having achieved atonement. For her, the blood will never come off her hands. She might not have been able to avoid harming humans entirely like Nezuko, but she was the demon that switched sides. Like Nezuko, she was fueled by the memories and love of her family, but unlike Nezuko, she had to go it alone, before Yushiro. While not a fighter, Tamayo had a ferociously strong heart and will, and managed to become the linchpin in defeating Muzan through her intellect and skills as a healer. The final fight was of course a colossal group effort with everyone playing their parts expertly, but it was all made possible by a bereaved mother. Never underestimate anyone. Okay, I'm gonna wrap things up here because I've just got to stop talking now. My throat is killing me. Don't even get me started on all the demons, the rest of the Tanjiro squad, and other supporting characters. Unless. Just playing, I'm sure they'll be in a part 2. After seeing the first part of Infinity Castle play out in a theater, I just became absolutely insufferable, and this has basically been an exorcism for me to get out all the things swirling around my brain. Very eager to hear anyone else's thoughts on any and all things Demon Slayer. I feel like I just scratched the tip of the iceberg. There's just so much packed into this show. I'm so glad that Hinokami Chronicles 2 exists as an outlet right now. I'm notoriously bad at fighting games, but for Demon Slayer, I'll trudge through. As always, thanks again for being a part of this little ecosystem. I really believe this series has so much to offer people of all tastes, and I'm so happy just to add my voice to the choir.